row seats, I like it.
I was just thinking, like, not open her, and I was like.
I mean, like, open, you can have a twist house, you know. You want some wine? We can go into. We do have some in the kitchen, I mean, I would recommend it if you have a client up like that, but if you don't, you know, that we're adults, we're contractors. Could be, who knew this was gonna be a buyer consult, or buyer consult panel happy hour. Happy hour. Who knew?
Don't record it.
Yeah. Morgan, are we good to go? Are we live? And
Yeah.
okay, cool.
We're live, it's recording, you're good.
All right, cool. So, well, welcome. We are gonna keep it cash today. Are you okay with that? Like, I'm eating my meal, they're eating their meal, we're just keeping it cash. As you know, I had a focus of really being a vision of being the office that leads the way in terms of the buyer consultation conversations, right? And my goal was that everyone in this market center embraces buyer consultations and buyer partnership agreements. You know, the industry calls them buyer agency agreements. I like to call them buyer partnership agreements because it really is a partnership. And so we've been committed to doing these classes once a month at least on buyer consultations. And we've been doing them for, gosh, what, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months?
All year.
Oh, yeah, a long
Maybe
time.
December was the first one.
Yeah, because we knew these changes were coming and we knew the biggest challenge that most agents would have was, how do I present this contract to buyers? And how do I add value? Because I'm used to just going to show a house and kind of winning them over from there, which is not a bad way to do it. It's just, is that the most effective way to do it, right? And so we decided to fix it up this time and interview these amazing ladies, or not interview, yeah, but
I was like, whoa, Bridget.
not interview.
But they are flying, that one.
This is casual, yeah, casual. So let's do a quick intro for those that might not know. Start with Laura and move my way down.
Hi, I'm Laura, I'm on the Bespoke Homes team.
Hi, Laura.
Susan's team, so we are half Gateway, half Brighton. And I've been in the business since COVID, really, almost 5 years now, almost 5 years.
So you came into the business during a rapid time of change, just like now.
Yes,
Oh.
yes, which is absolutely my best advice for anybody newer-ish. Is
During COVID.
yeah, I joined during COVID and I was like, I don't know what, why everyone's freaking out right now, because I didn't know anything different.
So that speaks to what Kat shared at our stakeholders meeting today, which is that whole technology thing of. Technology is only new to someone if they have no frame of reference from before, right? COVID, showing houses remotely was just how you learned.
Everyone was freaking out, I was like,
Yeah.
what is your problem?
Yeah. Right.
What is the big deal here? So anyone who's like newer now, it's like, what's our problem? We'll get over it, you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Emily.
I'm Emily Martini. I work for the Jennifer LaRoche team. I as well I'm in my 4th year right now, so I definitely same thing started as COVID happened and felt the same way. I didn't know any different, so I just thought, okay, well, this is real estate, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, let's go.
Oh, love it. Jumped right in. Yep. Never look back.
I'm Heather Yap, I'm a solo agent, I'm actually newer to KW, I started in March this year. I also have been an agent for about 4 years, I celebrated my 4-year anniversary on Monday. So, yeah.
So we didn't really plan that all of you started at the same time and all of you are on this panel. Really interesting. I mean, I know that now, but it wasn't. Yeah.
It just shows that we can be successful agents can come out of weird times.
Yeah. Okay, so, one, keep it casual. I want to make sure anyone in the audience can ask questions too, and we'll keep the conversation going, keep it conversational. What I wanted to start with is a question around, walk me through your relationship with buyer consultations and signing listing buyers, right? Like, what's your relationship history, where you are now? Bring us on that journey real quick.
I'm just going down.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. When I started, it was during COVID again. I did not understand the value in a buyer partnership, signing a buyer. We didn't have to, so I thought, we don't have to do it, why not take the path of least resistance and just meet some strange man in the woods of Dansville, it's fine. And so that's what I did.
You're still here.
Then I, and so that's how I just did my business that way, and I saw agents, Ramella is who comes to mind the most. And when she said, I will not work with someone who doesn't sign an agency agreement with me, I was like, okay, extreme.
Right.
And I just didn't, I didn't see the need, I did perfectly fine, I didn't lose any buyers. And then I took a class with Susan, maybe 2 years ago, probably by now. I was on Courtney's team at the time, and all of a sudden, my eyes were open. I thought, wait a minute, I understand now. I didn't know how to explain it, I didn't know how to show my value, I didn't know how to ask somebody to partner together with me. And in that class, everything changed for me. And so from that moment on, I thought, I can freaking do this. And I was just in that week up against somebody who didn't want, I wasn't sure if I was gonna sign them as a buyer or not. And I had a Zoom and I was like, I can do this, I can freaking do this. And I was on a Zoom and I asked them to sign it and they didn't want to. They said, well, why should I? And I said, why can't you just let us, work with you without signing anything? And I said, this is my standard, this is how I practice my business. If I say no and give in to what you want, why would you think that I'm gonna stand up to a listing agent when I'm negotiating for you? And they were like, okay. And I was,
Did they end up signing?
ultimately, at the time, no, but, only because they realized through all of this that we went through that she wasn't ready to buy a house.
Got it.
So we are still in communication, but she was young and just really not ready to buy a house, and she's gonna probably be a renter forever. But it ended well, and we are still in communication to this day with her and her parents, who are like, well, we sell our house, we're gonna come back and talk to you. So it was, very supportive for me of, hey, you can do this, you've got this, and I grew a pair in that moment, which I definitely didn't have. And since then, it's standard practice for me.
Well, you could have easily buckled and been like, okay, too much pressure, yeah, no, I won't sign it.
I don't know where that came from, me saying that. It was
Somewhere
just,
any time, I'm sorry to jump.
Yeah,
in.
please.
But like in that conversation, would you have ever said, well, that's fine, I can send you this information, if you wanna think it over, I'll come back to you tomorrow.
I do that
Get
now,
your decision,
I do that now.
because I feel like I've done that, and I wanna know if it's wrong.
No, I definitely do that now. I just had a consult last night and I said, I'm gonna send you the paperwork.
Yeah.
And, read through it, let me know if you have questions. You can talk about whether you feel like we're gonna be the right fit to go forward or not. I give them time now.
You do.
Because my consultation now is so good that I don't doubt that they're going
They're
to.
going to sign it.
Do you remember so Heather, you were at the panel, Remember I talked about that one magic question? You heard this at Mega Camp. Bill Jones says the one magic question that a lot of people ask right if they get married is, will you marry me? Most people that ask that question have a 90%, 95% confidence that they're gonna say yes. That's kind of what you're describing, is you built this confidence to where you know.
Yeah, I had no doubt in my mind at all that the people I talked to last night were like, ready to jump at houses.
Cool, yeah, okay, great background. Emily, how about you in your relationship and journey with buyer consults? Did you start right away or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Nope, not even a little bit. I didn't start doing buyer's consultants until last year. I
Okay.
think. So I hit the ground running and I'm like, I'm gonna show as many houses as I can and I'm gonna do as much as I can in real estate. And I was determined to grow and be successful. And so it didn't make sense, not that it didn't make sense to me, it just wasn't part of my practice at that point, right? However, when you sit back and I think about it, how many hours of wasted time, gas, you name it, time away from my family, those types of things, that I probably could have avoided or I could have gotten back if I hadn't had those stronger conversations, buyer's agreements, the full consultation, the whole thing with my clients. I will say I wasn't necessarily apprehensive about doing them, but once we started to practice them, it really is a game changer. The relationships you build with your client from that point during that consultation is amazing, right? You really, I love my clients and I work hard for my clients, whether they signed a buyer's agreement or they didn't, right? But there's so much more value, there's such a bigger relationship that's created through that hour and a half. Asking questions and really understanding what their wants and their needs are, diving deep into certain things. And if that conversation is, and the focus is just on really knowing what your clients want, and you're really genuinely there just to help them, to me, to talk about having them sign a buyer's agreement is just another little tiny piece that, little thing at the end, little.
And oh, by the way,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, by
So
the
yeah,
end,
so I went from doing not a single one of them to doing them all the time, and I haven't had somebody not sign.
awesome. Miss Heather, how about your journey?
So my journey has been transformative. When I first started real estate, my broker had been in the business or has been in the business over 37, 38 years. And he's a fantastic broker, but he works on a handshake and that's not his fun. So I didn't really know of a buyer agreement. Probably until a year and a half that I was in the business because I took every training opportunity that I could, but there was never a conversation on it. And how I was taught was, hey, you wanna buy a house, that's fantastic, I'll stick with me or you stick with me and I'll stick with you kind of thing. And I go, well, what happens if you have a for sale by owner, and maybe they don't wanna pay and, don't worry, if they don't pay you, I'm not gonna burn any bridges, it'll come back around to you, and it just triggered my thought of like, this seems like there's a little bit of a gap here for me, so I started kind of investigating the paperwork and the buyer's agreement. And I read through it and I'm like, why wouldn't I wanna do this, like, this seems really silly.
I list buyers, right? Why not
Yeah.
list seller, or
Yeah.
sellers?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started doing it on my own. And I would say that probably 75–80% of my brokerage never did an agency agreement. There was maybe one or, I'm not even kidding, maybe under 5 people that did it in a group of over 120 something people.
Mhm.
So it was an oddity, right? So I thought, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna figure out how to do it well. So I started with doing it then simplistically, and then as I kept going, I thought, wow, I need more time, and I thought to myself, wow, am I slow, am I like, what's going on here? But I developed this kind of system that this buyer's consultation wasn't like one quick meeting, it was 45 minutes pre-consult or the discovery call, right? And I was like, whoa, that's what that's called. And then it became 2 to 3 now since COVID, or since the new NAR settlement, like 3 conversations, an hour here, hour and a half here, hour here. And it's really investing in this relationship, to be quite frank. And I've done business like that for quite a few years. I'll never do anything differently. And I'm glad that, being here kind of opened my mind a little bit to, why it's so important. And it is about educating the buyer on the value of what the paper they're signing is. So.
The common thread I just heard there is like, it's like a car crash in the sense that once you see it, you can't unsee it, or you can't look away. Like once you saw and just committed, you haven't all faltered, you've all committed to the path because you see so much value.
Yeah.
And now the rest of the industry is catching up because it's always been a best practice, right? This form has always been available.
Yes.
It just hasn't been broadly taught because, like you said, it's kind of like path of least resistance. Like you didn't have to. So why do the extra work? Even though that extra work is taking 2 steps back, it takes 10 steps forward.
And that's what I think it is. I think that so many people prior to this were so intimidated by the paperwork that they didn't know how to present it. They didn't even know what the jargon meant. And they weren't gonna do something else that was just another chore to them.
Sure.
Or another paperwork to them, so.
Okay. So I thought what we could do is dive in maybe a little bit where you could give us an overview, not super detailed, but just like overview. What are some of the key things you cover in your consult? Sounds like you have different pieces, right? Because I thought, well, let me take a poll from the group, from the people in the room. Do we want to focus more on what they cover in their consultation, or do we want to lean it more towards conversations right now on compensation, post-NAR? And any of those changes, because I know you guys are prepared to do anyway, but what does the group find more valuable, Lisa?
I do have a question, that would be more right now.
Okay,
With buyers who I've been working with, but have kind of taken a little break, so they haven't signed a new agreement since the 15th. And I sent out an email and didn't get a reply, so now I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to approach that, like, I know you're taking a little break, but can we have this discussion? So I just was curious as to how you would approach that and what language you might use.
Has anyone done that yet? Reapproached clients that have previously signed?
I had an interesting aha when I met a customer at a house a couple days ago. I actually have a consultation with him at 3 today. But I met him in a customer capacity relationship, yeah. Because it was my own team's listing. So I met this person and his wife, I didn't know them. Had really no background, let him know ahead of time that we were gonna sign a just agency, that I was representing the seller, and he was my customer, and if we wanted to move forward, I could write an offer, but that was it, and then after that, we pursue a partnership, which is where we are now. But in speaking with them, I said, they told me that they had written a bunch of offers and hadn't got their offer accepted, and I thought, oh, I didn't know that. I said, were you working with? And they shared with me the name of, sometimes they don't, and that's okay, but they did, and they said, well, we just kept losing. And I thought, oh, this is an interesting nugget to tuck away from my consultation with them if I get one, because they probably weren't educated enough to write a good offer if they keep losing over and over again. But in that moment, I thought, oh, nobody has anything signed right now, unless you've signed your previous clients in the last week. Everyone's a free-for-all. Every buyer is unsigned, essentially. So I thought, well, I don't have to worry about whether or not, because they haven't been working together in a while, so they're not signed currently with them. And it made me think, I really need to go back to all of my people who are just hanging out there, even if they're not really, really looking right now, because they're up for grabs with anybody.
They are, and I would argue that in their mind, they're probably still committed to you, even though they're not actually signed according, like, one could argue they're not, they probably still think they are, so you can navigate it however you want. If it was me, I would approach these conversations in an organic way rather than email and try to get all of them at once. It would be, hey, the next time a house pops up, this is a really great chance to regroup. It's been a while, right? Let's regroup on your strategy. I'd like to update you on some new changes in the industry and transparency and how that affects you, right? Versus we need to sign this right now. But that's just my thought.
Yeah, I've asked mine, I have some just hanging out like you, Lisa, that are not really looking right now, and I have sent them emails and texts, just because it's not always that they don't have it doesn't check their email all the time. And I just had one reach back out to me. I said, you did want to buy a house before the election, this guy wanted to buy a house before the election. I said, if you still want to, the window's closing. And we have some new paperwork, let's regroup, so we have a call tomorrow actually, to just regroup.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of bringing them back, go back to their initial motivation and see what's changed.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a conversation all around the new forms. It's a great opportunity to regroup on market changes, interest rate reductions. Do we need an updated pre-approval, especially if it's been a while, right?
Yeah, I feel like like you just said, the purpose of the phone call or the email should really be just like collectively checking in. And if you organically rolling that into the conversation, it's a no-brainer, I wouldn't think, you know what I mean? Hopefully nothing really will change, right? And sellers will still do a really great job of, compensating the buyers, but it's still the same, I look at it. I mean, to me, I'm not putting so much stress into this whole thing, because if I'm doing my job and I am doing everything I can, and I am showing my value 120%. If they've gotta cover some of my commission, or we've gotta find a way to negotiate it in, they're gonna do it. When you're really working for your clients, they see the value, right? So I just think if checking in, like I have somebody who I haven't worked with in a while, for 10 home buyers, and we're doing a little check-in Zoom tomorrow morning at 8:30, just to go over how they're feeling about things. We've written offers, we've lost offers, we've taken a break for a little bit now. So just kind of checking back in, and then we kind of bring it back into the conversation a little bit some ways, that, it's however it rolls in.
There was something you said that triggered a question and I forgot. I lost my train of thought. I don't know, it'll come back to me. Heather, what are your thoughts on this?
I just basically, I'm a phone call kind of person, so, let's say I have some people in my database that are on searches, right? And if they're on searches, I like to be proactive instead of reactive. I don't know why I was gonna drink that, I was like, ready.
I was, I was gonna too, I was like.
There's wine in it.
Yeah, so I like to say, hey Lisa, I saw that you were looking, in the search yesterday and, we liked this house, this is great, like I'm so excited for you. There are some updates to the paperwork that we previously signed, I just wanna be able to go over with you. Does a Zoom work, can we set that up this week, because I want them to be ready.
Mhm.
If they call me and are like, hey, can we see this house? I need them to be ready, I don't want to do that at that time, I want it to be done prior to that, so. I just make a phone call and just have a conversation, like, I want you to be ready if you wanna see that house at 567 Oak Street, cause it's like a 1, 2, 3.
Oh my God.
So I want you to be set up for success, so, does that work out for you? I might just give 2 dates.
I like that. Logistically speaking, are you all bundling the
I do
buyer
everything.
partnership agreement with the fair housing or with the buyer seller agency that has the dual agency ahead of time and the franchise? Are you doing all that as part of that?
I'm only updating the forms that need to be updated, and then I upload it into Transaction Desk, and I create one document, so fair housing and agency and the franchise addendum.
Yeah.
Those are all standard,
They don't
So-
even sign
they don't need to be re-signed, so as long as they're signed and dated, it doesn't matter how old they are, from my assumption.
Yeah.
Um,
Also noteworthy, I was on a call with Anthony Gatto last week or the week before, and he said, in speaking of, sellers and buyers. That, active listings and buyers that have signed an agreement already. If you present them with a new agreement, a new exclusive right to sell, or a new buyer partnership agreement. And they refuse to sign, they want to keep working with you, but they don't want to sign a new one, they're just like, this doesn't make any sense, why, they just don't want to sign. They don't actually have to sign according to Anthony Gatto, that old one can still be in effect, but we just have to show as a brokerage that we've made an attempt to ask them to sign. So don't use that as an out, we still have to have the conversation, but if they push back and they're like, I just don't want, can we just keep moving, right? If they're just really busy people, like I would probably be one to say, really? Do you really need to, like, all this, everything's the same, I'm good, I got it. All you need to do is show that you've asked them to sign, so, little tidbit, yeah, right? Okay, so I've heard a couple of different options in there as far as, being proactive, having the conversation. Also having a conversation around a time that works for them, right? Like, we're here to meet them on their timeline, meet,
cheers.
meet them on their goals.
Using that line like that.
Versus have them meet us on our timeline and our goal. So I like what Heather said in terms of like, if I see they're in the search, looking at something, I'll use that as an opportunity to pick up the phone. I like the phone, the verbal conversation I heard from all three, because I think it's so much more than an email. It's gotta be a conversation. They have to have an opportunity to ask questions. Absolutely.
The only time I email is if I'm trying to make a touch point, like if it's if it's based around any type of business that needs attention, I always make a phone call.
Yeah.
I wouldn't send a mass email, but that's just personally me.
I think it's to each your, like to your buyer, whatever you're, like I have some buyers, remember buyer consult, I mean, I've had them there half hour, that's all they want, right? They don't want an hour and a half, they don't want 2 hours, they don't want me jibber jabbing, so I just meet them wherever they are. I've got clients that I've been working with for over a year now, I'm gonna meet them at a property, it's our first time looking at property in a couple of, well, I should say probably like 3 months now at this point, but and I just explained to them, I said, listen, I said, we have some new forms that you'll have to sign, okay, sounds good, I'm like. So we're gonna do it there. They're doctors, they don't want me to flood their emails, they just want great bringing with me. So it's like knowing my clients, knowing their personality types to know, okay, this is what they want.
And if you have it, so it sounds like you already have a signed document too, right? So this is just upping it. You can reference back. Remember we met and we talked about the conversation around my compensation, my fee. We signed our buyer partnership agreement. We've got a new form to sign because it's really the same. You've already signed one. It's just a new form talking about how commissions are negotiable and not set by law. Other than that, it's pretty much they're signing the same thing. But you probably want to weave in a conversation around how going forward, I'll make sure when we write an offer to share if a seller is offering compensation or not. And then we can decide how we handle that, right?
Hey Susan, can you just spin around and check the chat?
I don't know, I see something, I don't want someone to have a question.
I
Maybe
will say, so I had a lead came through the other day on Zillow. And this gentleman was so adamant and wanted to see this property, and I was like, okay, I said, you know, let me just ask you a couple questions, and let me explain to you some of the new things that have come into play, you know, what we have to do in order for me to show you this property, this and that. And he's like, well, you know, I have an agent, and I said, why can't I just see the house? So I explained the situation to him, he's like, okay, I said, listen, I said, if you've got an agent, he goes, well, I don't wanna waste their time.
No.
And so I, and
It's yours.
right,
Yeah.
so this gentleman's personality, and I said, well, let me ask you this, so it's okay for you to wanna waste my time, and I'm not your agent, and you're not gonna write an offer with me? And he was like, oh. And I said, right, I said, listen, I'm 100% willing to help you out, I said, but you need to, if you're agent, if you have an agent who you're actively working with, that's who you need to be working with,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, he's like, well, I'm not really that active with them, I said, well, why don't you touch base with them, and if they don't respond back to you, and you know, I'll send you a little bit of information on myself, and you can touch base with me, and we can go from there. It's like, okay, sounds good. So he calls me, this was last week, so Monday morning he calls me, he's like, yeah, he's like, I never heard back from her, and I was like, okay, I said, well, moving forward, I said, we have to set up, we'll have a little conversation, but I just really wanna get this property, I said, I understand that you wanna see this property, so I went through the process again with him. The nice thing that, this is how I'm looking at it, like the positives of the change, is that this guy wants to see the house, great, you have to be able to be willing to sign something in order to see this house, whether it's with me or somebody else.
Mhm.
So to me, is this guy really that serious?
Right,
Probably not,
right,
right?
More accepting rather than lying.
yeah.
Right, so it's like, I'm like, here's the pre-qualification process, I can set you up with the lenders, or I think I might take it personal, no, great, I just need. So I've been going through this little rigmarole with him.
Yeah,
Where in my beginning stages of my career, it was like, how many houses can I show, whether you're, I don't know whether you're qualified or not, I just wanna get out there and I wanna show how it
At
is,
bat.
I wanna be, right?
yeah,
And I'd probably throw up if I thought of it, kind of figure out how much money I wasted with all that time to travel. So it was nice, it was such a big aha for me, where I was like, okay, this guy is not really he's pushing to see the house, but doesn't wanna really jump on a buyer's consultation with me, doesn't really sign anything, so it's like, great, I'm like, I can have 100 conversations with you for 5 minutes over the phone all week if you want, I said, but I'm not showing you that property until we at least have a buyer's agreement signed, even just for this particular
sure,
house.
not
right?
exclusive, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so what you just said right there, I thought about this the other week, as I was working with our inside sales agent around handling objections, and I thought, what a gift. What a gift the industry just handed us when we are converting leads on the phone to an appointment, because we can now say, hey, I'm not sure if you've heard, but there's a new standard in our industry around signing agency agreements when you go see a house. And so whether I take you or someone else takes you, you're gonna have to sign an agreement. And so wouldn't it make sense to slow down and interview an agent? Why don't we get together and have a consultation? And rather than show up to a house and have someone slip you a piece of paper, wouldn't you like to slow down and know what you're signing and talk through with me and put a strategy in place? Like, I think that's such a gift.
I was just gonna say that because, and I didn't think about it until she was just saying it out loud.
Mm,
And people are so apt to be so bullheaded about everything, but in all actuality, the state has given us all of these gifts of time and savings, if we can, and it's not like, you know, you're gonna not sign with me and then you're gonna think that Laura's gonna show you the house, because we all are practicing the same standard.
Right.
So in all actuality, that you can run to 10 agents, if we're all doing the same thing, then we're better off.
Yeah.
Nothing ever gonna go higher standard.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The most recent agreement always holds the highest weight, so I'm thinking about buyers or liars, and if someone just wants to see a house so badly, and they do sign on your car outside that house, is your most recent updated contract the most valid, or is there a way that this is gonna create conflict in the coming year?
I think it
with-
could.
With people just, maybe I signed with 4 agents.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Like,
and
this agreement
yeah, so
won't-
if it's
Non-exclusive.
exclusive, I think there could be a legal argument, and not an attorney, but from a broker's perspective, that the first one signed stands and everyone
first
else
one.
after that is in direct conflict with their first sign, just like you think of exclusive right to sell.
Right,
With the seller, you can't have anyone else come in and sign with them because they're in an exclusive relationship.
The
Yeah,
likelihood of
actually-
people like tracking people down, I think would be crazy. you know.
I wish
maybe-
that there was a way in.
I know.
Right, like, you just enter-
register.
No.
Enter their name.
Almost like they have like an inventory of buyers signed in the MLS.
Right.
How cool would that be?
Right.
List your buyers. I've got a buyer at this, you can look them all up. Oh,
Right.
I just think
know
if
that
you're
you're-
having the right, if you're having really like,
Right.
this gentleman was like, well, the amount of information you just gave me was a whole lot better than the last person I just spoke to. Cause he's clearly calling Zillow trying to, or Zillow trying to get somebody to show him the
Right.
property.
Right.
Immediately.
And
Yeah.
so instead of me being like the last guy who was like, blah, blah, whatever, basically they just kind of gave me the finger and was like, I'm not doing anything for you. I'm like, well, great, this is an opportunity for me to pick up a client, right? Like whether it might take me 2 weeks to get him to wanna sign or to get him to meet with me. But I'm creating value every time I pick up that phone or I return a text back to him just saying, hey, you know, this is what the agent told me, this is where, you know. And so I think you can go 2 different ways with it, right? Like we can look at this whole thing as a negative, right? Or we can really look at this thing and say, okay, great, well, this is gonna make me a better agent. Because I'm gonna be really fluent with my conversations, I'm gonna make sure that every time I talk to somebody. I show value instantly, so that if they had to pick, they're gonna hopefully pick me, you know, and it's giving us the gift of not being able to just open the door for just anybody anymore.
love that.
Which we never had to do that before, but just.
Yeah,
Someone said that to me on the phone, they were saying they literally called through my entire office directory, and they were like, but don't you legally have to show me the house, I'm standing in front of the house, and I go. No, I don't legally, I have to go meet you, strange man.
Right.
House. Like, no, this is not a lot, luckily, I'm so happy.
Yeah. What I would say, just so you know, from what he probably heard is that the broker does have to service that lead. That doesn't mean
broker
you
does.
as the agent.
Right, right.
Yeah, so then I'd be like, Tom,
Yeah, you should go meet this guy.
this weird guy.
You should go meet this weird guy at the house.
Exactly.
Have
How
you
about
ever had to?
me? No, and I've told
So many
agents.
agents.
Yeah,
So many.
right. No, I haven't.
Yeah.
But I've told Chuck, if someone calls on, or not calls on one of our listings, but there's a lead and it's in an area that my girls aren't comfortable with for whatever reason, right? Chuck, you're gonna get the call, and if it's in my office, I guess I would get the call, you know, gotta service it. Okay, let's dive into, well, I have a thought, but anyone else in the room wanna take this and pivot to another?
Can you give us some examples of like your fact find questions for the initial buyer consult that you've added or anything that you've adapted as a result of the new paperwork, anything that's new, like, and the first one, the reason this came into my mind is. You always ask, do they have an agent, or have you already worked with an agent, who have you worked with in the past, what was your experience like with them? What are some additional things maybe that you've thought of now recently in the last few weeks that we've been implementing these?
Can I,
Yeah.
I'm gonna qualify that question a little
Yeah.
bit, because it sounds like what you might be asking is more in what we call here the discovery call,
Okay.
leading up to the consultation to qualify the lead,
Okay,
right?
sorry, I'm using Northwestern Mutual terms, I'm like,
Yeah.
fact find.
Yeah, in the fact find, yeah, so like LP Mama, things like that. Have you heard of LP Mama, Cat?
No.
LP Mama acronym, okay, who wants to take that one? LP
It's
Mama,
on the wall.
oh, cool, it's on the
We're
wall,
taking it, love it.
but what are some of your key
Oh,
go-tos?
I heard that, I heard you
Maybe,
discuss
yeah.
it, yes.
I haven't really changed anything.
Okay.
Because I've recognized that if I'm working with a new buyer, they don't know what it used to be. And I did have the very first time I explained it was very clunky and it was a previous buyer and I was like, you know what I'm saying? And so now I realize, okay, Laura, you gotta stop that crap. They don't know what they don't know, so I don't need to say anything different, other than, are you working with an agent? The normal stuff that I would say.
Did you ask what date you said?
Yeah, that's what's circulating in my brain, I'm like,
I'm thinking if they have to sign. the
did you
new
send
form.
this here?
Well, one of the things I ask that's not as direct as are you working with an agent is, how have you been seeing
Seeing
homes? And then they'll say, well, I've been going to open houses, or like, that's just my lead, how have you been seeing properties thus far? And that leads into, oh, I'm working with an agent or whatever, yeah.
I don't think anything's really changed. Because if I am taking a lead, I'm going through the same conversation, like I'm not adapting my conversation, my like, that discovery call. My actual wants and needs analysis, nothing's really changing, the value's still there, the like. I'm still diving in and really dissecting everything that they need, I'm giving them the buyer's power checklist to go over, to talk about what could happen in this. What we're seeing, if they're willing to do any of those things, like I just go through all of it, and then it's just, and here's a buyer's agreement, you know, I don't know, I think it's, for me, and maybe it's not the right thing, but it works for me, is that I'm not putting so much focus on like. Right?
No,
Just
but I
like-
think you're
My
thinking,
trigger when someone brings it up is typically Tom's talk track, which is, not very much has changed. We went from a minimum requirement of having to compensate buyers with $1, now it's 0. And that, I feel like I've said that line probably too many times, but I feel like that's my pushing it aside statement,
Sure.
that things are very, very much the same.
Yeah.
And I think to Laura's point earlier about like the trust relationship. Luckily, I had someone where she was traveling and I'm like, I can't like schedule this. I wanna make sure that we have this signed. And her text message response to me was, and I really wanna get her on the phone call. I'm like, I really wanna talk with you. Maybe we can get on a Zoom. Like, I know you're traveling, but can we just do the Zoom so we can talk through this? And I highlighted the contract and I wanted to talk through it. She's like, yeah, I trust you completely. Nothing really seems like it's changing. Like, I'll just sign this. She's like, I didn't even read it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, all right. Well, thank you. Good. I'm glad that you feel that way. Like,
Right,
thank you.
but also
But I
agree that
want you to
you-
understand.
yeah. And we'll get there as an industry, I think, in general, where it's so heightened in us right now, that this
Yeah.
is all new and different.
Yeah.
But to them, they're like, I wanna see a house, what do I do? Even if they're not first time home buyers, maybe it was 8 years ago since they bought a house, they don't remember what they did 8 years ago to buy a house, I don't remember what I did 8 years ago with my financial advisor, you know what I mean?
And to your point about all these free agents, I think there's gonna be a great shuffling. I think not only are we gonna call the herd with agents, but I think there's gonna be quite a bit of shuffling if agents don't communicate value very well. And I had 2 people almost immediately. It was like the Friday deadline, and then the following week, I had 2 people that were just peripheral friend circle people that were like, hey, I know that you sell real estate, so and so said that you sell real estate. And my agent literally called to hit me over the head with this contract, and can you explain this to me? Can you just explain what it means? It's like,
Yeah,
come on, sit down.
yeah, let me take you under my wing.
Like, it's like if money becomes the most important piece of this, if
Right,
that's what you're
right.
driving, then to me, that's a turn off. I would instantly be like, done, right?
Yeah.
But that's me, I don't want, cause I want somebody who's working for me, like if I'm a buyer, I wanna know that the last thing my agent's thinking about is how much money they're gonna make, right?
Right.
You know, and I think there's a lot of those agents out there where it's about the money first, so for, like, if you're coming with the same
Service,
service, right,
Yeah.
that same
Part.
value of like, I am here to be your agent to help you buy a house. The last piece of it should just be that simple kind of, hey, this is what's changing, and there should be no issue there.
Yeah.
I haven't had it yet, knock on wood, I'm sure I'm going to have some at some point, right, I mean, it's still so new, so it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, in the next month. But I'm just a firm believer, if you come with your heart forward and you're really doing what you love doing, and you're really there to help a client out, this is just a small little fraction at the end of it.
well, and to what you just said, and here's what's changing, I actually don't know that you have to have that conversation with a brand new lead. With someone that signed with you before, certainly, but with a brand new lead, I don't think it should be focused on change, it's
What it is.
here's the process, here's what happens next, here's what you can expect from me. I have a question on that, which is, there's 2 schools of thoughts here, so I would love to know how you practice. When you are now then writing offers for your clients, at what point are you bringing up the cooperating compensation that might be offered? Are you bringing that up at the showing? Are you bringing that up at the time of writing the offer?
I've only had 2, well, I've written 2 offers since then.
Okay,
The first offer, we had gone through the due diligence of looking at the property, it was a virtual showing. So I dove very heavy into the virtual showing and talked a lot about the property, and they were just completely like obsessed with my style of how I showed them that, they felt like they were there, right? We talked about, I mean, we went through everything, and then all of a sudden I was like, wait.
this is new.
Well, I was like, it's not that it mattered, but I was like, I kind of have to know, right?
Yeah.
So I called the listing agent, she's like, 2% is the only thing is what the seller's willing to do for compensation for a buyer's agent. I said, okay, sounds great. So I literally called my clients and I said, here's what, this is our standard charge, it's a buyer's agent, it's 3%, seller's only willing to pay 2%. I can do one of 2 things, I can negotiate the 1% back into the offer somewhere, or I can ask you to cover that 1%, what do you feel comfortable doing? He's like, we'll cover it. So it's as simple as that. But the
So it was
reality-
it was just another term conversation in
Right,
writing the offer.
Right,
Yeah,
but I had already done so much work on the back end of it and really created the value, showed them the cost. Talk them through writing offers in New York State, what that looks like. I mean, I met them every place they needed to, so whether I was negotiating the 1% into the offer or not, it was just a small fraction of it, right? That was it.
right.
And then I did write another offer, which got accepted. It was very jackass word, sorry. But my client then called me and was like, wait, am I paying your compensation? What's going on? I was like, no, if you were, I would have told you. But it was one of those, it happened so fast, so those are my only two situations I've had with,
Sense, okay,
you know, this new change yet.
Yeah.
But everybody else that I called that have looked at houses with my clients that have been interested in, it's been 3%.
yeah,
So I haven't seen any of that, like, you know,
fall out or the,
fall out,
yeah.
right?
How about you, Heather? What do you do?
So I run numbers for my clients. If I'm writing an offer on a house, I run in an Excel spreadsheet, the numbers, what are closing costs gonna be, what are monthly payments gonna be, what does all the finances look like? I have my compensation already built into that total closing costs, so closing costs are 70,000 in their mind. Yep, I got the 70, okay, great. I actually am going to closing on Friday, and I had a client that had that conversation with him, he understood how much he was, you know, paying for compensation, but he didn't have to pay it, the seller was paying it. So he goes, okay, and then when do I write your check? How do you get paid? I know that I have to pay you, we talked about it, and I said, oh, the seller's actually cooperating with my brokerage, so you don't have that. And he's like, wow, I saved $7,500, that's great, you know, he was like, but I could pay it if you need to, and I'm like, no, it's upset, you know, whatever, so I had that conversation prior to writing the offer of how much total closing costs are
Charge
gonna be.
6% next time.
Yeah.
But he was all gung ho, still ready to pay me, and I'm like, no, we don't have to, you know, so they're just prepared
They're
that that
prepared.
is a cost
Yeah.
of doing business.
That's fine.
So you bring up a great point that when you're at the consult, do a buyer net sheet in the sense of these are the closing costs that you will bring to the table. Assume that they're paying your commission so they can see what worst case scenario would be, right? Same thing when you're working with sellers and you do a seller net sheet. Even if the seller is not willing to offer cooperating compensation up front, let's say they choose not to for their own reasons. I would still do a seller net sheet to show them if they did pay for a full, what I would say full would be like my fee, right? If I were to be the buyer's agent on the other side, I would ask you for this. So let's put this amount in, right? So that you can see what you would net. That way, when they do see offers come in asking, it doesn't take away from the net number you gave them. Does that make sense?
Well, I think sometimes too, I just did this with the seller that I just listened to going live next week. So, pushing it out there.
Yeah.
It was.
123 Main
I was
Street?
excited. It was 123 Main Street. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or not. Yeah, great property. It was my first time doing the new exclusive price to sell and really talking through, which kudos to Kim because we sat down and the three of us did, and it was an awesome way for me to really understand
Learn it.
in a bit more of a personal setting versus everybody else. I get too overwhelmed. But going through that net seller sheet for her was fantastic, right? Because anybody that goes, okay, I'm gonna sell my house, let's get $400,000 house and it's 6%, that's $24,000. Oh shit, right? But then they see, okay, this, if it sells for this, then but I'm still netting 90,000 maybe, right? So when they see the difference, they go, okay, well, that $24,000 is a lot of money, but I'm netting 90 still. So I think it helps kind of counterbalance that a little bit with that brain, you know?
Yeah, it's focusing on what they get, the return, rather than the expense.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I love that. Laura, how about you? Are you having the conversation with your buyers as you're doing showings or as you're writing offers?
I am heavy on virtual buyers right now.
Okay,
And everything I've shown, I've called ahead of time with questions and just asked. And every time it's been, they're paying, the seller is paying 3%. So I
Okay.
haven't had to have the conversation with any of my buyers yet.
have you written on any of those?
Yes, I have,
Okay.
one was accepted and it subsequently fell apart at inspection. Second one's due in half an hour. So, yes.
What's
Yes.
due in a half hour?
My next
Your
offer.
offer? Oh, so
It's
you need-
ready, I just need.
Got it, okay, we need to get you out of here early. Okay, so I have a follow-up question from that. So then, if you have a seller that's offering your full fee, are you not having the conversation at all at the offer, or are you letting them know, hey,
I'm
just,
just
you know,
letting
good,
them know.
okay,
Yeah,
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 I would
the
recommend
seller
that,
is-
always be bringing it up.
The seller is
Yeah.
paying this 3%.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah. Yeah,
And I have a buyer under contract that was it was a 60-day close, they're closing tomorrow. And before the change, but when it was really in the media, they emailed me and they were like, hey, do we have to figure out how we're gonna pay you now?
Yeah.
I was like, no, you're good, their seller's paying it, but thanks for asking.
Yeah,
It's the only person who kind of came out of the woodwork and was like, hey, we saw this on the news.
sure.
How do we figure that out? Do we have to go back to our lender? And they were open to doing
Sure.
it, but it was interesting that they asked.
They were solutions based,
Keep
yeah.
money.
Well, Heather, you know from the panel last week that I feel like this conversation around, are you asking at the time of showing or at time of offer, right? Because we had this conversation about listing agents getting all these calls before showings, and I kind of shared that I don't believe you actually need to know at a showing, show the house, and then you can know if you're actually gonna write the offer. And that was like very polarizing of a view. There was some people that felt, no, I need to know at the showing, and some people that felt that they didn't.
Well, those are the agents that will see what happens in a year or two, because they're not creating relationships, they're creating deposits, right? So I feel like if you
I know, I like it.
just go to do your job and follow what you should be doing ethically, you will get paid. I don't need to call and ask you if you're gonna give me money if you like my offer. It doesn't, we've had the conversation prior, your buyer knows, it should really holistically be your responsibility as the buyer to get that under control first. Get the client educated, get them signed so they understand, hey, you might have to pay a fee, like, you tried to educate me like a fiduciary, like an attorney, like, a doctor. And those people, they get paid, right? It'll all
Yeah.
work itself out.
It was just really polarizing. It was really interesting. And the case that I made was, if you highlight your compensation every single showing, then if there's a certain house where they're not offering your full fee and you're bringing it up and saying, oh, well, they're only offering this, they're only offering this, that just puts your commission at the forefront of potentially being the blocker between them getting that house or not. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It should be one other term in the contract.
It's like a car salesman, you can't.
Yeah, no, I don't.
It's not-
Well, and if you've already qualified, if you want me
Exactly.
to show you every house, it's like, it could be client specific. Is it someone that will not, in any case, they don't wanna fork up $1 to pay, but it's probably very rare that you would actually have a client that you'd be showing houses to. And they wouldn't possibly like come out of pocket to pay you any dollar amount, anything.
Right.
So it's like, if you've already set the stage, it's like, I assume you wouldn't want me to eliminate anything from your search criteria. Now you don't need to call every single agent before every single showing, because you would show every single.
Right. And Jim Yackel brought up a really great point, CEO of GRAR, because he brought up that exact example where I kind of posed an objection to him because I hadn't gotten my mind wrapped around it yet. And I said, it actually came from Alex on our team, where she was like, yeah, but I just had a buyer that was so adamant about the principle of this. They're like, Alex, I don't want to see a listing unless they're offering you 3%. I don't want to see it, like, on principle. And I respect someone that has a lot of like really strong principles. And Jim brought up a good point. He said, okay, what if someone a listing wasn't offering anything, it happened to be their dream house, Alex didn't show it to them, and then Alex said, or the buyer got upset, well, why didn't you show me this house? It was perfect, we missed it. And Alex is like, well, remember that conversation where you told me you only wanted me to show you houses that were offering 3%? And they're like, well, yeah, but for this house, I would have figured it out. For this house, I would have bent on my principles. And that could be a real big issue, so.
I think it like anytime I'm showing houses, typically, we all know, we've all done it, right? Where you showed a house that you know that your clients are not qualified for before, right? You're like, okay, this is gonna probably go,
Yeah.
they're dying to see. it.
Sure.
So what do?
Yeah, this is gonna be an education. We're gonna chalk this off as a learning
Right,
experience,
right.
yeah.
So I think if you are looking at a house and let's say it's a $200,000 house and you know that, and you've done your due diligence, you've looked at the comps, you know that this house. Everything's screaming 275, 300, right? And you know they can't go there anyhow, so. I think it's, I guess it's the same thing, like, I don't need to know what they're offering.
Yeah.
I need to know what my client wants and what they're looking for and really be able to just continue to do what I've been doing, right?
Yeah.
And then, like you said, I mean, we could write it in, you never know, right? You just never know what can happen, but if you don't give us the if we don't give them the opportunity to see the house, then
Exactly,
we never know.
exactly. 5 minutes, final questions from the group. Thanks for coming in. Final desire to ask a question, anything that came up? Don's thinking.
Yeah, do you have any?
No, I just got this is, I feel like I've been gone a year,
Oh.
almost 2 weeks, so I'm like.
Does anyone have any experience with negotiating like 2.5% or like getting in and out? Like I haven't heard any back and forth. I guess I've only written on things over 3%. I've only offered 2%. I want to hear like some squiggly moments. I'm waiting for the stories to emerge.
Are you talking about
Like writing
negotiating
offer
commission with a
agreement.
buyer or in an offer situation?
In an offer situation.
Okay, yeah.
Nothing, no.
Anything yet?
I mean, my closest was just it was like, and that was one of my moments where I'm like, because I was sitting, I'm like, how am I gonna ask them for 1%? I'm like, oh my gosh, because my personality is like, I'll pay too, I
Yeah,
don't care, right?
I'll
And I'm
share.
just like, no, because for the hour and a half drive all the way up here, for all the work, you know what I mean? So I was just like, you know what, like, stop, I'm like, just ask, just say, hey, listen, this is what we got, this is what we charge. This is what our compensation is, this is what the seller, how do you want me to take care of the other 1%? And it was, we got it, like, it was that quick, and I was like,
cash or charge.
yeah.
Anything that you've
I
experienced?
mean, with respect to that. I don't know, I don't find this to be a big deal, and maybe that might annoy some people,
No.
but I really don't find this to be a big deal. If that's a situation like 2% and whatever, I've already had my conversation about 3%, my client knows. So if the seller was paying 2% and there was another 1%, I would just say, hey, do you want me to try to negotiate this? We can do that, or, you know, we already have an agreement for 3%, right? So, you know, for the 1% comes out.
Or would you rather keep it out to make
Yeah.
your offer stronger? Yeah.
The seller's paying 2%, great news, you know,
Yeah,
you're only responsible for one.
Someone posted in the Facebook group about an agent that wasn't disclosing the buyer compensation at all, and they said write the offer, I'll tell you when you write the offer. And I was wondering if
That's
anybody had
rude.
bumped into that, I'm like, oh, that is real vicious.
So you just write it in with the request.
Write it in for a request.
We'll have to assume that it,
It's kind of like a secret.
yeah, I don't know
Side-
why. That you might as well say we're not offering anything, bring us your back. I
Right.
don't know how that
It's
benefits
almost
anyone.
implied that they're offering us.
Exactly,
Right,
just assume,
say.
yeah, but I will say, so I had a seller, it's actually closing today, no, today's Wednesday, Thursday, it's closing tomorrow. And the seller was offering 2.5%. And we got multiple offers, and one of the offers, the agent, now this was before the change, okay, and one of the agents that wrote in the other terms, seller will pay 3%. Great, awesome, presented the offers, no problem, it was just like business as usual. And it's funny, that offer didn't prevail, not because of that, there was another offer that was like 20 grand more in price, right? And my client countered a little bit on a couple of terms, but he said, you know what? Because this is so much far over than I exceeded, like you've exceeded my expectations, this other agent, like exceeded my expectations, I want them to have their 3%. And he offered that in the counter offer back, which was really cool. So I think we could see more sellers say, I'll give the full if you get me this price. Like, I think that they might start to think like that a little bit more too.
We're not allowed to disclose that, we could never, would we be able to before or during negotiation, I'm thinking about, like, if I say I wanna get 275 plus, I'll only pay 3%, my seller will only pay 3%. If we get 275 plus. we
I think that's
strategically
disclosable.
disclose That,
Yeah,
So.
I think that's an offer of compensation. It just
Yeah.
has a term attached to it or a contingency attached to it, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think as a buyer's agent, though, they would need to disclose to the buyer, all right, here's the deal. The seller is offering 2% for this price, 3% for this price. And that's the one thing in all of this that I don't think is being talked about. And actually Phil Jones brought it up and our exactly what to say training a couple of months ago was no one's talking about how buyer's agents, if the buyer is compensating them, they're paying more to sell them a higher price house, right? Which is just a really interesting, if you think about it, that's why the seller has always, not why, but one of the reasons it's made sense for the seller to pay, because the seller is motivated for that higher price. Now, we're not motivated to sell our clients a higher price home. We're motivated to get them the home that works for them. But it's really interesting when your motivation is to get them the best house at the best price, but you're paid more for the higher amount. You know what I mean? So it'd be interesting to see if anything comes of that, any changes.
which is where I wish that flat rate incentives become more of a trend. I think that actually ethically makes more sense to me in my brain personally. I know not every agent agrees with that, but I think having a listing, you take what your anticipated sales price, if I want $525 for this house, that's what my seller's expecting and hoping for, we really want $525, I take 3% of $525, and I advertise that as the carrot, that's the prize for selling this house. Whether you sell it for 500 or you sell it for 525, it's not contingent on the actual sales price, it's just that's the price we're willing to offer. And now buyer's agents can articulate that my value is that I negotiated the lowest sales price and I wasn't incentivized in any way to get you to sell it for the highest price to my own buyer.
Yeah, I could see an
I
argument.
morally agree with it, I wish that was actually the way to try it.
I could see. I think being in any sales, even though I say we're not salespeople, in any sales type of organization, it's very common to have commission incentive base, so it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see where that goes, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us and for all your valuable questions. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your experiences.
I know, so I have to see them.
Yes.
So I had my client bring it up to me the other day. She owns the property. I don't know, a couple years ago or whatever. And she's like, where do I live? And I, what are you talking about?
Oh,
Yeah.
the lot.
Oh.
And I never, I just, I don't focus a lot on the media.
Same girl.
So I was like, and she's like, oh, like, I sold something, so I should be getting my commission back or something like that. And I was just like, ooh, I'm gonna have to ask about this, because I haven't heard the side of it.
So I guess I don't, what's the question?
Basically, she
take
sold.
part in the class action lawsuit.
Yeah.
So she needs to investigate if she's taking part in a class action lawsuit. What that involves to
I
Well, I think we have to let them know their rights, like, we can't just.
Is there, I mean, are sellers, is that what's happening, that sellers that sold in this window of time are now allowed to get their money back?
They can join this class action and end up getting 50 cents out of the 100 million, that's, you know what I mean?
And I was like, oh, so actually, you know, we haven't even. Didn't even think about it, or side of it, know nothing about it, I said, I just know that what's changed on my end of things.
Yeah.
I handle that incorrectly. Tease your client.
So don't do that. We're not recording. Oh, no. So funny. Thanks for joining us, everyone on Zoom. Have a great day.